Welcome back to your channel Leo Storyland. Here we uncover a real Reddit story. If you liked my video, please like, share, subscribe. My name is Dana Foster and I'm 38 years old. My 17-year-old daughter spent all day cooking for 23 relatives for my mom's birthday. She started at 7 in the morning, tying her hair back with a faded blue scrunchie, pulling out every mixing bowl we owned and lining them up on the counter like soldiers. Her name is Willow, and she'd been planning this menu for 2 weeks straight, filling a spiral notebook with recipes she'd copied from my mother's old handwritten cards. The pot roast, the garlic mashed potatoes, the cornbread that took 3 tries to get right, the lemon cake my mom always said was her favorite dessert on earth. Willow wasn't doing this because anyone asked her to. She volunteered the second she heard we were hosting Grandma's 70th birthday dinner, and she said it with this bright, stubborn look in her eyes. The same look she gets when she's decided something matters to her. "I want Grandma to know somebody thought about her all day," she told me, standing in the kitchen with flour dusted across her cheek. I remember thinking my chest might actually burst from how proud I was of her. By noon, the house smelled like rosemary and butter and roasting onions. Willow moved through the kitchen like she'd been doing this her whole life, checking the oven timer, tasting the gravy, adjusting the seasoning with a pinch of this and a dash of that, muttering to herself the way her great-grandmother used to. My husband, Roland, kept poking his head into steel bites, getting swatted away with a wooden spoon every time. Our younger son, Miles, sat at the table peeling potatoes because Willow had recruited him with the promise of extra cake later. It was chaotic and loud and smelled incredible, and for a few hours, our whole house felt like it was holding its breath in anticipation of something good. Willow set the table herself around 4 o'clock, pulling out the good tablecloth from the hallway closet, the one with the embroidered edges that only comes out for holidays. She counted place settings twice, made sure there were enough chairs pulled in from the garage, folded the napkins into little triangles because she'd seen it done that way in a video once and thought it looked elegant. 23 relatives were coming. Aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, my mother's oldest friend from church, who everyone just calls Aunt Ruthie, even though she isn't technically family. Willow had accounted for every single one of them, right down to my Uncle Desmond's dietary restrictions and my cousin's toddler needing a booster seat. At 5:40, my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and glanced at the screen, expecting maybe a reminder or a question about parking. Instead, it was a text from my mother. "Change of plans. We're eating at a restaurant. Adults only." I read it twice, certain I was misunderstanding something. I called her immediately, and she picked up on the second ring, sounding almost breezy about it, like she was telling me she'd switched hair salons. She said Aunt Ruthie had suggested a new steakhouse downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and a wine list thicker than a phone book, and that it just felt more appropriate for a milestone birthday. When I asked about Willow, about the 8 hours she'd spent on her feet cooking an entire dinner for 23 people, my mother's voice got a little clipped. She said kids get restless at places like that, said it wasn't really geared toward teenagers, said maybe next time Willow could join for cake afterward if things ran late enough. I stood there in my kitchen, surrounded by the smell of a dinner nobody was going to eat, and looked at my daughter across the room. She was still humming along to whatever song was playing from her phone, carefully drizzling icing over the lemon cake, completely unaware that the rug was about to be pulled out from under her. I told my mother I needed to think about it and hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I stayed quiet, but I made one move instead. I didn't tell Willow what my mother had said. Not yet. I watched her finish decorating that cake, watched her step back and admire her work with this soft, satisfied smile, and I made a decision right then that I wasn't going to let this be the moment that broke her heart. Instead, I picked up my phone, walked out to the back porch where nobody could hear me, and started making calls of my own to Aunt Ruthie, to my Uncle Desmond, to my cousins, to anyone who might actually care more about my daughter's feelings than a steakhouse reservation. I laid it out plainly. Willow had cooked all day for this family, and if my mother wanted to eat somewhere else, that was her choice to make. But I wasn't going to let 23 relatives simply vanish without at least knowing the truth of what they'd be walking away from. By the time the sun started dipping behind the houses across the street, my phone had lit up with more responses than I expected. And the next morning, my mother was calling me over and over, her voicemails growing more frantic each time, begging to see me before I even had my coffee made. I let my mother's calls go to voicemail 3 times before I finally answered on the fourth. It was just past 8 in the morning, and I was still in my robe, watching Willow scrape the last bit of icing off the cake dish with her finger, blissfully unaware of anything unfolding around her. My mother's voice on the phone was tight and fast, none of the breezy tone from the night before. She said she needed to see me, that things had gotten out of hand, that people were saying things to her that weren't fair. I asked her what people, and she went quiet for a second before admitting that Aunt Ruthie had called her at 10 o'clock the previous night, furious, saying she wasn't about to sit in some overpriced steakhouse while a 17-year-old girl sat home alone with a birthday dinner nobody bothered to eat. Apparently, Ruthie hadn't stopped there. She'd called my Uncle Desmond, who called his daughter, who called her brother, and by midnight the family group chat had exploded into a debate my mother never intended to start. I told her I'd come by, but I wanted her to understand something first. I wasn't angry on my own behalf. I was angry because Willow had spent 8 hours on her feet, planning, shopping, cooking, setting a table with folded napkins and place cards she'd handwritten in her careful cursive, all so her grandmother could feel celebrated. And the reward for that effort was being erased from the guest list because a steakhouse felt more appropriate. My mother started to explain herself again, something about wanting one elegant adult evening for her birthday, but I cut her off gently and told her that conversation needed to happen in person, not over the phone while my daughter was in the next room humming along to the radio. When I got to my mother's house 40 minutes later, she was sitting at her kitchen table looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, a cup of coffee gone cold in front of her. She told me Ruthie wasn't the only one who'd called. My cousin Delphine had texted saying she wasn't coming to any restaurant dinner if it meant snubbing a kid who'd clearly poured her heart into something. Even my Uncle Desmond, a man who rarely weighs in on family drama, had sent a message saying he remembered what it felt like to be young and invisible in this family, and he didn't want that for Willow. My mother said she hadn't meant it as a rejection of my daughter specifically, that she just wanted one grown-up night without spills and sticky fingers and teenagers glued to their phones. But intentions don't always match impact, and I told her as much. I asked her to imagine being 17, spending your entire summer day making someone's favorite meal from scratch, and then finding out you weren't even invited to watch them eat it. She didn't have a response to that. She just sat there, turning her coffee mug in slow circles, and after a long stretch of silence, she asked me what she should do. I told her the truth, that the decision belonged to her, but that whatever she chose was going to say something lasting about what she valued. She could go to her steakhouse dinner with a guest list quietly missing its architect, or she could walk back into my kitchen and eat the dinner her granddaughter made with her own 2 hands, surrounded by people who actually showed up. My mother sat with that for a moment, then reached for her phone and started typing a message to the family group chat, her fingers slower and more deliberate than usual. She told everyone plans had changed again. Dinner would be at my house after all, exactly like it was supposed to be. We didn't tell Willow any of this. When people started arriving that afternoon, filing through our front door in their nice clothes, carrying bottles of wine and bouquets of flowers, Willow's face went through this incredible transformation, confusion melting into disbelief and then into pure, unguarded joy. My mother walked in last, and instead of heading straight for a seat, she went to the kitchen where Willow was pulling the pot roast out to rest, wrapped her arms around her, and told her that in 70 years of birthdays, nobody had ever cooked for her with that kind of love. Willow's eyes filled up, and she just kept saying it was nothing. It was nothing, even though every single person in that kitchen knew it was everything. Dinner that night stretched on for hours. The pot roast disappeared. The cornbread got fought over, and the lemon cake got so many compliments that Willow started keeping a mental list of who asked for the recipe. My mother sat at the head of the table, laughing harder than I'd heard her laugh in years, occasionally glancing over at Willow with an expression I can only describe as quiet. Nobody mentioned the steakhouse again. Nobody needed to. Willow had cooked her way into being seen, not because she demanded it, but because 23 people decided a 17-year-old's heart was worth more than a fancy reservation.